All right, guys, we're rolling. Welcome back to the Low Carb Consultant Podcast. Today's guest is Professor Bart Kay, a former health science professor who spent decades teaching physiology, nutrition, and exercise science before stepping away from academia to become one of the most outspoken, independent voices in nutrition. He's known for breaking down complex metabolic concepts like the Randall Cycle, challenging mainstream dietary narratives, and advocating for low-carb and carnivore approaches through a science-first lens. Now he educates hundreds of thousands online as a self-described nutrition watchdog and myth buster. So, Professor Kay, thank you so much for taking the time and coming on. It's an honor to have you here and pleasure to meet you.
Likewise, Max, my friend, and because we are friends, Bart will be just fine. We don't need to stand on any kind of ceremony whatsoever. That guy you've just described sounds incredible.
He sure does. Yeah, let's definitely get to know him a little bit. And maybe before we get into everything here, Bart, would you mind giving the listeners just a real brief background on yourself, your story, and how you gravitated towards this point you're at right now?
Yeah, it's a long story, which I can make pretty short, I suppose, in that I started my first undergraduate degree at 27 years of age. And the first degree I got was in the physiology of rest and exercise. Usually they used to just call it sports science, and I specialized in exercise physiology, etc. Got the academic bug and enjoyed what academia was at that time and how it was run at that time and how I could slot into it. And so I then became, for the next, over 2 decades, I became a perpetual academic / student, because you never stop being a student. And over the next 20 years or so, I taught in all the different areas you were talking about. So exercise physiology, human nutrition, cardiovascular pathophysiology as well was an interesting one that I taught into for quite a while, all overarched with quite a significant understanding of pure and applied statistics, statistical inference, research methodology, ethics, etc. Published a bunch of articles on a bunch of different topics. And unfortunately, while all of that was going on, the world was precipitously, suddenly, for want of a better term, falling apart at the seams in terms of politics, attitudes, etc. And academia lost its way entirely, and over that period of time steadily became less and less a rigorous, epistemologically based discipline where people could apply a discipline and come up with good results and I guess contribute to knowledge. And it became a woke, ridiculous mess. The most simple example of this is when I first started teaching in academia, the metrics I was judged on at the end of each semester by my departmental dean or whatever was, what grade point did your students achieve? Which is what it should be, I would have thought, as an educator. By the end of it, the primary outcome measure that we were judged by as academics was student satisfaction. How much did they like you? Now, at the end of the day, the reason for that, well, there were multifaceted reasons for that, both financial as well as political, wokeism, all of this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, if my job is to educate you, that's my job. I am not there to be your mate. I am not there for you to like me. Example, when I used to teach pure and applied statistics, I would not allow my students to use SPSS software or similar packages to calculate statistical outcomes. I made them do it longhand and show they're working. Students loved that. My student satisfaction grades were because of that. However, at the end of the day, my students were able to go into an academic discussion with other academics and win those exchanges, for want of a better term, precisely because they understood exactly what math was done. That inference, and they could do that math themselves. The students that were being taught by other academics, lesser academics, could not do that. They got great student satisfaction results. Ha ha, you had that guy that made you do it longhand, didn't you, is what they were being told. I did those guys a favour, those students. I think probably nowadays they understand that. But at the time, no. So I was getting caned for that, for example. That and a bunch of other things made me decide to walk away from academia entirely, which I did in 2018, at the end of the academic year there. I still have my finger in the pie, if you like, or my toe in the water, for want of a better analogy. I still do contribute to academic discourse, discussions. I still hold several roles within academia, but I am now a fully retired academic. I do not teach students in a classroom. I do not work for a university anymore. I'm fully self-determining in terms of employment anyway. I decided, as you alluded to become social media influencer, which can, if you do it right, be more lucrative actually than being a senior academic. Who'd have thunk it?
Yeah.
And it's not because of AdSense, I can promise you. It's not because it's not the YouTube pay that's making the money. I can absolutely promise you it's not that. There are other ways that social media influencers can leverage their influence with their audiences, like the marketing of one or two things, which I do, and the provision of some one-to-one coaching, counseling on various issues. So I do that. Further to that, about 16, 17 months ago, myself and my lovely partner decided we're going to buy a farm, because somebody said to us, buy a farm, it'll be awesome, you'll love it. So we bought a 40 or so acre farm, and we run some sheep, some goats, some cattle, some ducks, some chickens, and a bunch of waifs and strays of various different species. And that keeps me pretty busy. So that's me in a nutshell now. And yeah, while I go roll my eyes and go be a farmer, it'll be great. The main reason for that is because in that first 16 months, we've had everything. We've had pestilence, disease. We've had 2 biblical floods, 200-year floods, 2 of them, 2 weeks apart. So I think there's something wrong with the math on that. They can't really be 200-year floods if they happen twice in 2 weeks. Anyway, they did. Yeah, so we've been through the mill, basically.
So buy a farm, they said. It'll be great, they said. And
yes.
So interesting. And going back to the academic portion, so it just sounds like, to me, to sum that up, because I had a question around what were some of the reasons why you stepped away. It sounds like to me, just to phrase it up in the simplest way I can, a lot of the students were just becoming woke, whiny little bitches.
There is that. And then add to that, a lot of people that haven't worked in academia, haven't been in academia, may not know this, but in every reasonable westernized country in the world that I'm aware of, even though most of those countries have now lost their minds, shall we say, there is a law which is called academic freedom, basically, or it's referred to variously as academic freedom. The actual name of the act is different in each country, of course. But what it says is a person working in academia, researching and teaching in academia, has the absolute right to hold and espouse any opinion he or she should so see fit to hold and espouse, whether or not that opinion is popular. I have always been hardwired to think a little bit differently. I'm actually so-called on the autism spectrum, so they say. I have a so-called mild form of autism, which, among other things, causes me to present as a divergent thinker on many topics. Rather than divergent thinking, I like to think of the way I think as actually logical, actually science-based, actually backed up with proper deterministic modeling, reasonable logical progression, that kind of stuff, rather than being prepared to espouse accepted narrative. So I would, throughout the 20-something years I was in academia, I actually taught in 10 different universities So that tells you something about the fact that I'd had to move around quite often because I got into the same problem just about everywhere I went at some point. And the problem is this. That academic freedom law is often at odds with another piece of policy that most universities have, which is a document called curriculum. This is what we teach. We teach that LDL causes heart disease, for which I was never, ever going to stand up and say that's correct, because it isn't correct. It's wrong. So I would stand up in front of fee-paying students and say, look, you're paying a fee. My job here is to educate you as to the actual science here, not the accepted narrative on it. So what I'm going to tell you is, here is the accepted narrative. The accepted narrative is LDL causes heart disease. The scientific facts are 180 degrees out of phase with that, and here is what they are: X, Y, Z, A, B, C, right? So often, I'd be doing that for about... I'd go for an interview, for a job interview at these institutions, and they'd go to me, oh, right, so it's great that you're here and your CV looks awesome and you have this awesome publication list and you've done all this science and stuff, so we're very impressed. Nonetheless, here's the question. What makes you different from every other academic applying for this position? Why should we give you the job? Which I'd say, I'm glad you asked. Here's what it is. I will not stand up in front of fee-paying students and lie to them. I will tell them the truth about what the science says. Oh, tick, 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 give them the job, which they did, invariably. And then I start doing exactly what I told them to their face I would do, and within a few months, hello, I'm the dean. You've been saying some things that are problematic to students in your classes. I said, really? Like what? Apparently you've been saying LDL doesn't cause heart disease, for example. I said, yeah, I told you I was going to do that. You gave me the job. And guess what?
Yeah.
The law protects me absolutely. It tells me I can do that, and there's nothing you can do about it. So then what they would do over the next few years is basically bully me out of there. So after 20 years, I was sick of the attempted bullying. I'm actually unbullyable, by the way. Some pretty oppressive, pretty impressive, pretty normally, I guess someone would say, scary characters have tried to bully me, intimidate me. Good luck. Anyone that's watched any of my videos will go, yeah, they'll be laughing right now. They'll be going, no, that's not going to happen. So that's the more full explanation of it.
Got it.
Like, this is not for me. I'm going to go and do my thing.
Got it. And that makes sense. So it was a combination of the two things. Maybe the woke, whiny, bitchy students, plus the administration up your ass telling you what you can and can't say. Therefore, you start your YouTube channels you're following, and now you've built something great where you can do what you want to do and say what you want to say.
So long as I stay within the rules of what the major...
What YouTube says.
Yeah, exactly, what YouTube says. So again, I'm now being limited to accepted narrative. So that went well for me, didn't it?
Well, let's dive into some of that stuff here, Bart, because I know there's a lot of confounding information out there. Obviously, you mentioned LDL. We can talk about cholesterol. I've had Dave Feldman on, so we can talk about some of that too. But I want to get into the Randall Cycle, and there's a handful of things I want to get into here with you. But maybe keeping it high level to start. Why is nutrition right now and nutrition science so confusing for the average person? Is it because there's so much confounding information out there? Like we've got the Carnivore group, we've got the Lane Nortons of the world, the Paul Saladinos. Is it maybe just information overload?
Well, my first thought around it is that when a person says health science, nutrition science, human nutrition science specifically, what a person needs to understand who hasn't got the background in science, which is most people, including most people in science, don't have a background in science. Okay. The thing that underpins almost everything that is published in human nutrition science.
Money.
That's what's behind it. Not science. How do we determine cause and effect according to proper, disciplined epistemology of science? We take two cohorts of subjects, in this case human beings. They are of identical size, subject pools. They are genetically identical. They have had the same experience and exposures identically from conception, if not before. They are held in locked laboratories under 100% control and observation at all times, and one factor is allowed to vary between those two groups for its assessment for a cause and effect response on the output variable. Now, the problems with that are this. You can't do it ethically. You can't do it financially, and you can't do it in practice. Because also, if you want to talk about long-term health outcomes or longevity statistics, guess how long you have to keep people locked under those conditions, under control? Their entire lives. Now, a lot of people at this point will tune me out and go, this guy's being unreasonable. This is ridiculous. Of course, we can't do that. Not me that's being unreasonable. It's everybody else that says the next bit that puts a comma after that period. Instead of the period, they put a comma, I should say. Because we can't do good science, what we have to do is rely on the best we've got. Hey, Peter Rogers. Wink, wink, mate. How did that go for you, by the way? That debate you had with me. How did that go?
Yeah.
Hilarious. No, Peter Rogers. No, the rest of the world. No, we do not need to rely on poor inference of cause and effect and suggest that we've got cause and effect inference. What we need to do is apply the correct, appropriate epistemological discipline, which requires us to say, we have a poor inference here. It is confounded by the fact that we cannot control these extraneous degrees of freedom, morally, ethically, financially, or practically. Ergo, we must refrain from making cause and effect statements. That's who's getting it wrong, not me. I didn't form the epistemological disciplines. They were put together some 2,500 years ago. I'm old, but not that old. I'm just following them properly.
So how do we fix that, in your opinion? Is there, I know you said it's hard to do some of these human randomized controlled studies because of, you got to keep someone locked in, control the variables, obviously not ethical. What would be the alternative?
Okay. The alternative, well, the first thing when you say, how do we fix the situation? How do we make the way that we communicate better with the lay public about what we do know and what we are guessing about, educated guessing, is this. This gets me into trouble with a lot of colleagues who are commentators in this field of health science, nutritional science, whatever. They get their noses out of joint with me. They get upset when I say this. I couldn't give a rip. I don't care. I'm going to say it anyway because I think this is a point. If you, whoever you might be, that wants to say, thus science says, here's what we know according to the science, you should yourself have a significant number of peer-reviewed publications that you yourself was the primary author on. Otherwise, you have no business saying the science says, because you haven't contributed to the science. You are not in the club. You do not know what the science says. If you are in the club, and I'm not the only one that is, there are many people in the club who have done a lot of science. Some of them are also imbeciles. Hey, James DeNicol Antonio. Imbecile. Hundreds of publications to his name. No scientific discipline, no apparent comprehension of epistemology, no grasp of even first principles of basic physics, that boy. However, he is in the club of people who you could say this is someone who's done a lot of science and published a lot. So those people need to actually really apply the same disciplines that I do, in my opinion. And that is, you can say, look, we have a number of inferences around factor X, Y, and Z as that relates to outcome variables A, B, and C. What we do not have is any studies whatsoever that can inform us on cause and effect in human beings. Not one anywhere. We need to be consistent with that. We need to tell the truth to people. And no amount of obfuscation, misdirect, smoke and mirrors, look over their shiny thing will change that fact. Those studies do not exist. So we've got an inference. Let's talk about the quality of inference that we've got. Let's talk about the strengths and weaknesses of any given study or any group of studies. Let's have a discussion about research, which will require actually delving into the research rather than splashing up the title of the paper on a screen or making a quick citation to a paper that absolutely proves X, Y, or Z, because it doesn't. And within 2 minutes, anyone can bring me any paper you like that absolutely proves X, Y, and Z in terms of hard human health outcomes over any period of time as that relates to any intervention, either, pharmacological or dietary or exercise or any of the things that I know something about. And within 2 minutes, I will pull that paper to bits for you because they are all rubbish. All of it. There you go. That's controversial. Yeah.
So when you say, what does the science say? You know what? Who comes to my mind is Lane Norton. I've watched him on a
Lame
handful of.
Norton. Lame Norton who can't correctly state the first law of thermodynamics.
Yeah.
Another example of someone who's done some science. I think he's got about half a dozen peer-reviewed papers to his name. He's also got an American-style PhD of the last 20 years or so, which is rather than a classic Eurocentric style PhD, which is a 4 to 5 year program of full-time research engagement, resulting and culminating in the production of a 500 to 750,000 word thesis. Instead of that, what Lame Norton did was some coursework and a little dissertation with a couple of research papers that were poor. So yes, he holds the degree PhD. Yes, he has the title doctor. He's got a handful of peer-reviewed publications of whatever quality. Not great, I think, personally, but there you go. And he claims authority in the field of human nutrition, despite the fact that the 2 studies he did for his dissertation were on rats, for example. He says, oh, look, calories in, calories out, though, it's a fact. It's just a fact of physics, though, because the first law of thermodynamics says so, which ignores the facts that I've just outlined in terms of his own credibility, and B, no, the first law of thermodynamics does not say that. In fact, anyone that knows what the first law of thermodynamics is will tell you that it explicitly excludes any mention of mass. Anyway, sorry, you're going to tell me all about Lame Norton. I jumped in.
No, I wasn't. I remember him saying, I was watching him on a Joe Rogan episode a while back, and but he kept on saying, what does the science say? What does the science say? What does the data say? So, I just find it interesting because he, in my opinion, I think he's a smart guy, bright guy. He does make some compelling arguments, but I just don't think there's much to it. And so
thing, and again, I'm sorry to jump in, but when you say
go ahead.
To compel means to give somebody no choice. Well, I've just given you a choice. I've outlined the truth about Lame Norton. The boy is an imbecile. He's also very, very brave. So very brave that he will not face me for a debate because I'm not credible. That's his excuse for not doing it. Actually, Lame, we all know why you won't do it. It's because I will tear you 7 new arseholes and you know it. There's a challenge for you. Sorry about that. Carry on.
Well, I guess in regards to what he was saying, and maybe this is where we can transition to carbohydrates, fat, fuel sources.
Yeah.
Should we think about diet more as choosing a fuel than making moral decisions about food?
Absolutely. Not just fuel, though. It's fuel and building blocks, nutrients for various purposes. So what we should do is think about our dietary intakes as that group of things that we would need to intake on a day-by-day basis and or across time that would provide us with everything that we require to meet our potential in terms of lifespan and health span throughout that lifespan. That which is required, that we have to get from an external source that we can't produce ourselves in our own bodies. And yes, that's how we should think about it. It has absolutely nothing whatever to do with ethics, morality, or any of that. Anyone that wants to talk about that in terms of dietary intakes for a human being and what's appropriate and not appropriate, I'm sorry, you do not qualify for this discussion. You've lost the plot. Because human beings, like every other animal, and we are an animal, we too have evolved over a period of time on this planet in a given niche. We are a specialist just like every other animal. We are designed biologically to get our nutrition, our needs from a given source. That is what we should do.
Agree. Yeah. I mean, if someone is choosing to go vegan for moral,
Sorry, you
ethical.
need to pronounce that vegan. Sorry, carry on. Yeah, if someone wants to go vegan for moral reasons, yeah.
If someone's going that route for moral, ethical, religious reasons, I do respect that. But the argument in which vegans use, well, plant-based is healthier, bullshit. And I think we all know it because we've evolved on planet Earth for 300, 400,000 years, hunting animals, eating meat.
Yeah, and about another 4.5 million before that, before we were fully human.
Yeah.
It's a long, long time. We've been doing this, well, forever, really, pretty much.
So if someone wants better metabolic health, what do you think they should be changing first?
If they're not eating a hyper-carnivore diet, that's the first thing they should do. Get to that. With the one caveat that you should not change your diet from anything to anything else like that overnight. That will mess you up. Don't do that. Change your diet from whatever it is to whatever you want it to be for any reason, slowly. Give your body a chance to adapt to the change. But in my perhaps not so humble opinion, the appropriate diet for a human being is hyper-carnivore, meaning 70% of your intake and above comes from animal sources. The flesh and fat of mostly large ruminant animals. Why do I say that? Well, because that's what the N14, N15 stable isotope testing on the collagen from the long bones of human remains of any age found anywhere around the planet, more than about 12,000 years old, tells us, i.e. before the Agrarian Revolution, which was a precipitous point in time where human beings suddenly decided that they knew better than nature and decided for some reason that instead of chasing these mammals around these mammoths around the place, why don't we plant grass and eat the seeds of that and domesticate some animals and have their lactations a bit, but mostly live off the plants, subsist on the plants. Then we don't have to chase them around. They're rooted to the spot. They can't run away. Climate's getting better. Let's do that. Dumb idea. One of the stupidest things people ever did.
Kind of fucked us, didn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. No lube.
So from your standpoint, is there anyone who should not do carnivore?
No. There are one or two people that may have some issues around applying it in the ideal fashion, because, one example that comes to mind straight away is alpha-gal, which is a situation where a person has been bitten by the Lone Star tick.
Oh, yeah.
And that has caused them to form an unnatural allergic reaction to red meat, in which case they're going to have to live on white meat and less red meat, for example, which is not ideal. But they can still survive, and it's still better to do that than to eat any amount of plants, I can promise you. There are other examples of people who need to do something different to what the average person in the middle of the bell-shaped curve should do, ideally. All my commentary, given that I'm speaking to a generalized audience, all my comments are aimed at the middle of the bell-shaped curve, and the caveats I give are just that. I'm talking to you guys here. There's a spread, and you guys that are at one end or the other, this may not apply 100%. You may have to modify to suit.
Sure. What are your thoughts on the high fat versus high protein debate.
Okay,
I've
I
had Ted
think,
Naiman on, he
yeah,
talks about satiety per calorie. I'm sure you're familiar with him. I've had Dr. Kiltz on. I've gotten in basically arguments with Dr. Kiltz
yeah,
on the high
yeah,
fat approach on his stream.
yes,
I've got my opinions, but I was just curious to see where you stand on some of that. Like Craig and Maria Emmerich, they've been on,
yeah,
they transition people who are on a carnivore diet, gaining weight, putting them on a little bit more of a higher protein diet,
yeah,
titrating down the fat. They
yeah.
see some results. I was just curious to see and
Okay.
hear your thoughts.
I've never been a great fan on focusing too much on ratios of protein versus fat. I think there's very little to almost no benefit to be gained in that for most people, with the exception of one or two people at either end of the bell-shaped curve that do tend to react better to one or other extreme situation for whatever reason. There is kind of an amount of protein that I think a person should take in, an average person in the middle of the bell-shaped curve, and this is plus or minus, of course. And the figure I usually throw at that is something like 2 to 2.25 grams of protein per kilogram of lean body mass, or ideal body mass, if you like.
So, real quick, kilogram down to pounds, is that essentially roughly 1 gram per pound
Very roughly.
of body roughly
Yeah, very roughly,
for
yes.
American standards? Yeah.
Yes, yep.
Okay.
For those of
Okay.
you that use freedom units, there you go. Very good.
Okay.
So roughly that, one gram per pound,
Got it.
to use the mixed metaphors there, because,
Mhm.
that's Americans for you. There you go.
Yeah.
Gotta love you guys. And we
Yeah.
do. You guys are the only ones out there fighting for freedom, it seems, at the moment. And I mean Americans below the border. The ones in Canada stand, not so much.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that's for
they're
another.
just mad. They're just mad because they just lost to us in the Olympics for hockey, so they're
Hurrah.
real
Cool
tipped
beans.
off.
Yeah, good. Okay, so that's about where it is. And it's, plus or minus 10, 15% will be the ideal slot for any given person at whatever level of activity, athleticness, or whatever that you actually are. That'll be where the range is. And then the thing that will vary most widely between individuals is how much fat you should have on top of that to meet your energy needs. Because at the end of the day, protein is supposed to provide you with the building blocks for your body, and fat is supposed to provide the energy.
Correct.
Now, when you think about it, even if you're a hypertrophy athlete, a bodybuilder, there's a base turnover of protein in your body that you need to, there'll be a wastage of protein that needs to be replaced. Sure. But even if you're a bodybuilder adding an amount of muscle mass every day, every week, every month, whatever, how much are you adding? Very little. So the difference between a hypertrophy athlete and Joe Bloggs in terms of your protein needs is not much. Because the biggest contributor to your protein needs is the metabolic turnover.
Mm.
So that's why I say, look, it's plus or minus 10 to 15% across the range on
For
that.
protein specifically.
Yes. And then the fat, that's the thing that differs widely because our energy expenditure, and I'm doing that because energy is a construct, that's the thing that varies most widely. And the thing that will determine for you most accurately how much fat you need is your hunger and satiety signaling, provided you don't destroy the function of that hunger and satiety signaling by pouring contraindicated unnecessary carbohydrates down your stupid neck every day. Sorry about that.
I had a question just in regards to the fat. So let's say we've got high-level athlete, endurance racer, bodybuilder, whatever the case is. Maybe they're more carnivore. Obviously, they're going to need to have more fat coming in through the diet as a energy source, right? Because they expend more energy than, Nancy, who's 60 years old and doesn't do anything. And so I guess where I'm going with this is when I was bringing up Craig and Maria Emmerich, what they're seeing is a lot of people coming to them from the high fat carnivore space that are gaining weight. And that kind of makes sense to me because if Nancy's 60 or 70 years old, she's not an athlete, but she's putting sticks of butter on her ribeye, she's running into some issues there in terms of, lipotoxicity, but essentially she's just overfueling herself when
So
she's
Nancy,
not going to be
Grandma
oxidizing. Yeah, I
Nancy.
want to get your thoughts on that. Sure.
So Grandma Nancy will sit down and tune into the YouTubes and find steak and butter girl Bella,
Mm.
who thinks she might be just into her 30s. She's 5'10". She's active, but of childbearing age, etc. And Bella's there eating sticks of butter, so Nancy thinks that's appropriate for her too. No, it's not appropriate for Nancy. That said, I also want to be clear about the Emmerichs. They fit squarely into the category of people I was referring to earlier who have no background in this, no scientific experience of their own, no credentials to speak of. Covered this in a response I did to a video that they did several weeks ago on this whole, what they're calling the protein-sparing modified fast.
Yes.
It's not a good idea long term. There is an ideal amount of fat any given person should eat, and it does vary between people. Some need more than others. There ain't nobody that needs to hold their fat as low as what the Emmerichs are apparently suggesting that people ought to, and to eat a whole bunch of excess protein. That is not a good idea. So if you're a devotee of those guys and that puts your nose out of joint, once again, I don't care. I'm sorry that you're offended if you're offended, but that is not my problem. I'm just telling you the facts. Those two should not be giving people advice for money or for free online, actually. Their credentials to be doing so are totally absent, and it's very irresponsible. Sorry about that. Not sorry.
No worries. Let's maybe do this.
Yeah.
Let's remove Craig and Maria Emmerich and let's replace with Dr. Ted Naiman and
Right.
Dr. Gabrielle Lyon.
Right.
I've had Ted Naiman on, and he's obviously a big proponent of protein, higher protein, has even referenced studies of, I believe it was cyclists consuming up to 300 to 400 grams of protein a day, no ill effects on the kidneys or anywhere else. He has this theory of satiety per calorie. More protein, you're going to be more satiated. Lower calorie, you can potentially lose weight, manage body composition, those types of things. Yeah, go ahead.
Good. Okay, so remember a bit earlier when I spoke about, okay, there are some people who have no credentials, no qualifications, and should not be talking publicly to people about this. And there are people that do have some who also are in the same category and should not be talking to people. Ted Naiman is one of those. How do I know that? Because he does not comprehend basic first principles of physics. Calories, he says. Oh, calories? Calories are units of heat energy, made manifest as excitations in the electromagnetic field with an exact mass of? Oh yeah, zero rest mass. There are several ramifications of that straight away. Number one, when I went to school, any number at all, plus or minus any number of zeros, remains unchanged, doesn't it? So calories cannot affect your weight, your mass, or its makeup at all. Secondly, if you understand basic physics, which Ted Naiman does not, and neither does Lane Norton, and a bunch of others like Mike Imbecile. You know who I'm talking about. RP.
Mike Israetel?
That's the one. He's another one of these guys. Have you seen that thing about his PhD thesis?
I saw some stuff about that. Yeah.
Anyway, that's for another day. Let's not bag on everybody in the whole world. That's kind of my thing, but whatever. If you understand basic physics and you understand what zero rest mass implies, it demands this. A thing that has no rest mass, therefore, is a thing that does not interact with the Higgs field. That means it cannot be brought to rest in any inertial frame. Ergo, necessarily, as per first principles of science, the exact number of calories that it is possible for you to consume is none. Ever. Can't do it. That's against the laws of physics. Sorry, not sorry. If you don't understand that, Ted Naiman, you should not be speaking to people about nutrition. Now, the response we would get from these people is, oh yeah, but energy is fungible. meaning it can be changed from form to form to form, which is correct. Absolutely, but that doesn't undercut my argument. Why not? Because to mediate the change of energy from one form to another, you need a mechanism that's capable of doing that. The human body doesn't have a mechanism for encapsulating heat energy, excitations in the electromagnetic field, and using that for its metabolic process. If we did have that, we wouldn't need to eat food, would we? We could sit in the sun. So, sorry, Ted Naiman, you have no credibility. Satiety per calorie. Whoops, looks like you're using a completely inappropriate concept here. And all your mates, like Ekberg. Is that his name? Forget. Enfield. Maybe that's his name. I don't know. Guys, you need to, when I'm saying guys, I mean everybody watching this. What people in general need to learn is to be critical consumers of information / disinformation that is put in front of you. You need to be a bit more discerning as to who you listen to. And the thing that determines who you should listen to is not what pieces of paper they can tap, what certificates they can tell you they've got. You need to listen to what they have to say and whether what they have to say is supportable with basic first principles of known science. And someone like, because we're picking on him right now, and we'll continue to do so until I'm done, Ted Naiman, he's done a lot of research.
Sure.
Which he will then turn around and say, look, I've done this research that absolutely proves X, Y, and Z. Well, Ted, bring me your research, face me for a one-on-one debate about your research, and I will pull your research to bits within 2 minutes, because what you did not do was meet the agreed acceptable standards of epistemological knowledge as regards cause and effect over an appropriate period of time of anything. You did not control enough degrees of freedom to make a statement about cause nor effect with any degree of confidence. What you did is some research that was good enough for 3 peer reviewers who also work in the same field as you do and understand those problems, who have then reported back to the editor of a journal and told the editor of that journal that what you've written is acceptable to publish. Published research is not an inviolate canon. It's just somebody's words that has got past 3 reviewers and an editor, most of whom don't know what they're talking about either. A lot of people say, when I say that, people say to me, you're a science denier. No, I'm the bloke that's insisting upon science. The exact opposite of what you're accusing me of. And people say, but peer review is our gold standard. That's the thing that confers veracity. To which I usually then say, a little bit flippantly, great. Personally, me, this bad bald man, I have peer-reviewed more articles than most people have had hot feeds. What do you think about it now? Is it still very... If you think I'm an idiot, well, I've done more peer reviewing than, so there goes that argument. Or you accept that maybe the level of discipline that's being applied is not up to it in any field of research on human beings and their heart health outcomes or whatever. Isn't this fun? I love this stuff.
It is. It is fun. And so going back then to high protein, high fat, maybe to sum it up. So again, I know we can drop all the names out there, who's right, who's wrong, whatever the case is.
Just trust me, I'm safe and effective. Don't question the science. I'm kidding.
But I guess what I'm asking here is, in terms of people gaining weight on a high-fat carnivore diet, is it as simple as potentially maybe choosing leaner cuts of meat for that period of time? Would that be the route to go?
Okay.
Depending on your activity too? If you're more active, higher fat?
Got it. Okay. If you are referring to someone's level of adiposity, their fatness, that's what you should say. Because their weight, their mass on a scale, is affected by fat and or muscle and or
bone
water
density
balance and or skeletal mass, etc. Any one of those factors or any combination of changes of those factors can change your weight on a scale. And that might be positive. Your weight going up is positive. If you're a muscle building athlete, So long as you can look at yourself and say, I'm as lean as I was or leaner. That's a win. But if you say my
Maybe I'll
goal is
say,
to lose weight, well, there's several ways you can lose weight, including you could cut your arms and legs off, couldn't you? That would be immediately effective. Look at that. Job's a good one. I'm finished. I've lost all this weight. No effort involved, really. I just had to go and have my legs and arms surgically removed. So if we're talking about if someone's goal is to maintain
improved
a
body
certain level of
composition.
fat or improve their body composition, there are a number of ways that you can improve your body composition. There will be dietary inputs. There will be physical activity inputs. There will be hormonal balancing, endocrine balancing inputs. There will be removing the need, removing those inflammatory inputs, those things causing inflammation. So it's a rich tapestry.
Yeah.
So to say you're over fat, so eat less fat and eat more protein, well, that's just daft. Doesn't get anywhere near covering it off for a given person. It's a rich tapestry. You need to sit down with somebody competent who understands all of what I've just spoken about, work through what the issues are for you and what's likely to be causing your problem before you can take some advice. Ergo, the person that you're listening to for advice should be someone who knows what they're talking about. Someone who can cover off the sorts of things that I've just... Someone like me, as I said, I'm on the sides. I'm safe and effective.
I was curious, Bart, how are you eating now? Like what is the day-to-day look like for you? I know living on a farm, you're probably super busy. Like, what does your diet look like?
My diet of late has been pretty poor, to be honest, in terms of what's ideal for any given human being. That has no effect on what the truth about what is ideal for any given human being, what I personally do. But I'm telling you, because you've asked, it's poor. It's poor for several reasons. I've got some family members living here on the farm who are not carnivores, who love that kind of stuff, the bad stuff, and it's there and it's a temptation and I'm a hedonist and a human being. It's been a period of particular stress, not just because of what's happening on the farm and farm-related issues, but also we had a serious medical emergency with one of those family members recently that's led to some ongoing things that need dealing with. That's been particularly stressful and stuff. And so that's always an excuse to go for the comfort food or the nonsense.
Sure.
Or the alcohol or whatever else. So at the moment, for the last 3 or 4 weeks, my diet's been appalling. What is ideal is still exactly the same as it was before my diet went to custard 3 or 4 weeks ago. And that is hyper-carnivore. The closer to 100% carnivore, the better.
Great answer. What was your go-to? Steak, eggs, ribeye?
Steak
lamb?
and eggs and steak. That's what you should have for breakfast. You know the song. You're singing it in your head right now, aren't you?
Yes, I am. I'm also wanting it too.
There you go. So yeah, look, the flesh and fat of large ruminant animals mostly, plus or minus eggs, plus or minus dairy, depending on how you individually react to dairy. No sugar, no fiber, no plant materials of any kind, ideally, except for medicinal purpose. That's the ideal.
Beautiful. I wanted to talk to you about the Randall Cycle here for a little bit, and particularly too, maybe touching on athletes and the Randall Cycle, and if they're an outlier or if maybe they're affected downstream. And from what I understand about the Randall Cycle, it's essentially pretty simple, right? Your body prefers to either burn either fat or carbohydrate. When both are high, they compete, makes things inefficient. I was wondering if you could break down your thoughts on the Randall Cycle, like if we were a 12-year-old.
Okay, great question. At the end of the day, ostensibly you've covered what the Randall Cycle is. It is that propensity for mitochondria that are oxidizing substrates, so-called, for energy in order to produce ATP, that at any given tick of the clock, at any given time, at any given moment, each individual cell that's producing energy from substrates derived from the bloodstream, that individual cell has its own Randall cycle, which is a parsimonious description of the sum and totality of an effect that we're referring to, which is informed by the existence of several disparate but actually interconnected functionally bits of, for want of a better term, metabolic machinery that make this thing true. And it says this: a mitochondria that is burning, that is oxidizing fat, or has been oxidizing fat for the last, let's say, few minutes, that mitochondria will prefer to continue doing that. If in the last few minutes any given cell has been mostly oxidizing carbohydrate, it will prefer to continue doing that. And as you say, there is a bottleneck there. There is a sort of cross-inhibition of those two substrates. If one is predominant and prevailing, the other one is limited. Right? It's purely actually an inertia issue. There is a lot of metabolic inertia in the pathways, and it's that which causes, it's like, think about it as a train, a heavy train on a set of tracks traveling in a given direction. If you want it to travel back the other direction, first of all, you've got to bring all of that mass to rest, which takes applying a force. Then once you've got it to rest, you have to then re-accelerate it back the other direction, which again takes a force to do so. It's a Newtonian thing, is inertia, isn't it? It says that a thing that's doing something will continue doing that thing until a force powerful enough to cause it to do something else is applied. Words to that effect, right? That's what the Randall cycle is. Why does it exist? It exists because the first intermediary of the tricarboxylic acid TCA or Krebs cycle, various names for it, is acetyl coenzyme A. Acetyl coenzyme A can be derived from fat, or it can be derived from carbohydrate. It can actually be derived from other things as well, but in a much lower amount, so they're not really important at the moment. Those two items trying to pour into producing acetyl coenzyme A would mean that a bunch of acetyl coenzyme A would build up, which it does, and that's part of how it works. However, the main problem is this. If a whole bunch of sugar were allowed to build up within a cell because there's a lot of fat going through there, not allowing that sugar to go through, then we're going to have a very high concentration of sugar within that cell. That will cause glycation damage to the cell membranes, the lipid rafts, the organelles. Basically, that cell would be destroyed by being glycated. So the Randall cycle is a bit of internal machinery that what it does is it puts a key in the lock that would otherwise be opened by insulin on the outside. Remember those old locks where you could put a key in from either side?
Yeah.
And if you wanted to lock it from the inside, you could put a key on the inside and turn the key halfway around so that nobody can stick a key in the outside and make it work.
Yeah.
It's ostensibly what, to explain it to a 12-year-old who's never seen one of those locks anyway, it still wouldn't work. But for someone who gets simplifying things down, that's what it is. It's locking that door from the inside so that no amount of insulin will cause that cell to absorb sugar that it does not need because it would destroy that cell. Thus, the sacrificial lambs become the endothelial cells of the vasculature, the red cells, the white cells, etc., within the bloodstream. The sugar is held in the bloodstream. It's not allowed to clear from the bloodstream into the cells. That is not a disease. That is not a pathology. That is not a dysfunction. That is the human body doing exactly what it ought to do in order to protect itself from the damage that would be experienced were that sugar allowed to simply pour in. Because your endothelial cells, your red cells, your white cells can all be replaced much more simply, much more rapidly. That's not such a challenge to your body. So as we evolved, there was very little sugar available to us. So when we occasionally did overdo it with sugar, the body could deal with that within a day or two, no problem. The problem is that we now do that all the time. We pour in all this contraindicated unnecessary sugar, which is competing with the fat that we're supposed to be running on. Thus, the sugar is building up in the bloodstream. To which then the so-called knowledgeable people say, oh, that's called type 2 diabetes when you have chronically elevated blood sugar, and it's caused by insulin resistance, they say, which is a pathology. That's the underlying pathology. That's the etiology of the disease type 2 diabetes. And that's the exact explanation that you would get from someone like Professor Ben Bickman. The problem with it is it's absolute nonsense. Rubbish. It's the body doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to protect itself from glycative damage to the cells. So it does. The pathology, type 2 diabetes, is elevated blood glucose. It's not something caused by insulin resistance. The insulin resistance is the reaction to the glucose, not the cause of it. Ben Bickman is 180 degrees out of phase with reality, as is all the whole, both allopathic, medicinal, and academic fields that are suggesting that that's what the situation is. No, it isn't. Wrong. So the disease is elevated blood glucose. That's how it's diagnosed. That's what the problem is, because it's the glucose that's causing the problem. That's what needs dealing with. And the way to deal with having too much glucose in your bloodstream is to stop pouring things down your neck that break down to glucose. Well, that doesn't solve the insulin resistance problem. Of course it doesn't, because A, the insulin resistance is not a problem, and B, because that thing that you're referring to as insulin resistance, which is still not a pathology, is encoded for by your very genes. It's the thing that causes the cell to contain those bits of machinery that we're parsimoniously referring to as the Randall Cycle. How's that?
Beautiful.
There you go.
I got a question for you. It sounds like there are a lot of doctors, professors that you think might be quote unquote rubbish.
Yeah.
Who are some of the, if you want to call them influencers out there, professors, members of academia that you respect, you follow, that you are a fan of?
Right. Sure. I think Dr. Anthony Chaffee, who is a neurosurgeon originally from America, who now lives in Perth, Australia, he has a huge following for a number of reasons, including the fact that 99.9% of everything he says is absolutely correct. And he's also a friend of mine. I would like to consider him to be a friend. He's also a friend of Ted's.
Yeah.
Ted met him in Adelaide one day and they had a nice cuddle and everything. It was very, very moving. I didn't get one. Maybe it's the manly man thing. I don't know. So he's good. In terms of, there are people that talk about quantum effects, light effects, etc., and some of those people are completely reasonable, and some of those people talk absolute rubbish. One I would trust in that is another friend of mine called Dr. Sarah Pugh from the UK. Sarah with no H. Sarapugh. She calls herself the busy superhuman. So I'd follow her if you want to know about that stuff. There are people like Jack Kruse, Dr. Jack Kruse, who's another neurosurgeon, or was, who talks about light and quantum effects, but he does that in a way that's A, completely inaccessible to the average person that doesn't understand quantum physics, and B, more than half of what Jack Kruse says is absolute rubbish. For example, he says, unashamedly, that light is more important to your health than food. No, Jack. Nonsense. Wrong. Jack and I are also acquainted. We have been friendly. We have done videos together as well. It's been collegial. I have respect for Jack and what he's doing, just not what he's saying 100% or the way he's saying it. And I've told him that to his face. I'm not talking about him behind his back as well. So Sarah Pugh, in terms of that stuff. In terms of other allopathic physicians that generally get things right, mostly, Dr. Ken Berry, who is also widely popular.
Yeah.
The one problem I have with Ken Berry is this. When Ken Berry is not sure of something scientifically, he has a bloke that he asks. Guess who that is? Hello?
Is it you?
Yeah, it is. But he won't credit me for it. And I think it's because of the whole imagery marketing, the fact that I have this abrasive, sweary, gobby, everyone else is an imbecile approach, that's all it is. It's clickbait. I'm not really remotely as angry as I make myself out to be online. I just do it because it fascinates people and it's become a typecasting. I have to keep doing it now because if I put on a collar and tie and behave myself completely and just educate people, they go, what's this? We don't want to see this. We want you to swear at people. So I can't win. So I'm kind of stuck in between a rock and a hard place in terms of that. Who else is good? I think young Eddie Goki, who has no qualifications. I think he's brilliant. Again, because he has the right scientific advisor that he asks for advice. He's his own man, though. He's not mini-me. $1 million. People accuse him of being mini-me. He's not. He's his own man. He has his own ideas. His ideas just happen to be sensible mostly, and if he's not sure on something, he asks. So he's really good. Then there are a bunch of other people with whom I'm friendly who are people who, like Coach Stephen Thomas from the UK. I do a weekly show with him. We call it Unacceptable Views, where we talk politics as well as answer questions about health science and stuff. So we rag on the screaming left and, we do that kind of stuff, and we big up POTUS to some degree. And we point to the vastly, suddenly, absolutely crumbling edifice of the establishment in the UK at the moment. My word, that's going tits up, isn't it?
Yeah.
In the biggest way possible. I'm just trying to think, there's so many people with whom I could get alongside, but I think they're the main ones that, yeah.
Yeah,
But
well,
if a person wants to watch the right channel for the right science, the right ideas, the right discipline, the right epistemology, which is a word that means how we know things, that's my channel. Me.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I would agree. And I know when we're coming up here on time, I want to be respectful of what you got going on for the rest of the day. And we can,
so if you want to, shoot the breeze a bit more, we can. That's fine.
Sure. Sure. Well, yeah, for sure. I just want to be respectful of what you got going on. But yeah, let's go a little bit longer. Yeah, you got a great channel. I'm becoming a big fan of your content, love your style. And you were talking about Chafee earlier. I launched my podcast with him on Sunday.
Nice.
But when you were breaking down calories, is heat energy. He was talking about
where do you think he got that from?
Yeah.
Again, where's the
Sounds
credit?
like you.
And me, we're friends, for goodness sake. No,
Yeah.
I'm kidding. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he was saying the exact same thing. So it just made a ton of sense. Going back to the Randall cycle for athletes, though, real quick, because I want to get your thoughts on this, potentially any long-term downstream issues that athletes could be running into that maybe because of their genetics, they're not noticing now, their activity level, they're not noticing now, but maybe they could be down the line. And we know athletes do this, right? They, especially bodybuilders, endurance athletes, high carbs, high fat, ton of energy to fuel those endeavors. Is, from your standpoint and perspective, is that ever a good idea? And what should be the alternative?
Right. Okay. If the question is it a good idea for any given person, be they an athlete or not, to eat a diet which contains a significant amount of carbohydrates, the answer is absolutely not. No. Absolutely not. To which all the exercise physiologists will scream, "Oh, you need carbohydrates for exercise performance. What are you talking about?" To which my answer is, yes, you're absolutely right. You do need carbohydrates for exercise performance, but you're capable of making all the carbohydrates you require yourself. It's called gluconeogenesis. It's a thing. Look in any textbook you like, you'll find it. It does exist. It's real. And the thing that most determines a person's resting muscle glycogen level, which is the thing that determines performance largely, it seems. Sorry, Tim Noakes, but it's true. Is not how much carbohydrate is in your diet. It's your training status that determines that. You react physiologically to your training status. That tells your body how much glycogen it should store within a muscle fiber or a given group of muscle fibers or in the body at large. And so it does that. So your body makes sufficient glucose for that purpose. So you don't need to eat a single gram of carbohydrate ever. If your metabolism long-term is properly adapted to the species-appropriate, species-specific diet, i.e. the one that contains a lot of fat, relatively, and very little to no carbohydrate to speak of, then that metabolism is optimized for that, and it will not be a performance limiting factor. And I could point you to a number of semi-professional and professional athletes and or military/demanding profession folks with whom I have worked personally over the years to a very high level indeed, who have not only performed competitively, but have also kicked us, in fact, on diets containing very little to no carbohydrate at all. So to suggest that that is not possible is just plain ignorant. Do not need to consume any amount of carbohydrate. Okay, that said, if you are used to consuming a lot of carbohydrates, because that's what everybody tells you have to do as an athlete, so you've been doing that for years and years, and that's how your metabolism is set up, and I come along and say to you, hey, you don't need to eat carbohydrates, and so you suddenly stop eating carbohydrates, guess what's going to happen to your exercise performance? Which will absolutely prove everybody else right and me wrong, won't it? Except, no, it doesn't. Because that's exactly what I'll tell you you expect. One, don't change your diet overnight. I've already said that. Do it slowly. Secondly, if you're an athlete and you want to eat a species-appropriate, species-specific diet, you absolutely can, but you need to be prepared for several months at least that there will be a trough in your performance until your metabolic system recalibrates to their species-appropriate, species-specific intake. Yes, you will have a performance decrease for a short term, after which your ass kicking will return. And it does.
Totally agree. Totally agree. What do you think of Dom D'Agostino?
I haven't followed much of Dom. Well, I don't really know what he pushes largely. I've heard the name. I know who he is a bit, but yeah, I can't really give you an opinion on him. Sorry.
No worries at all. I was just curious if you ever heard of him. Big ketogenic proponent, researcher down in Florida. But he was the gentleman that was on the Joe Rogan podcast debating Lane Norton. It just came to me. I was my mind. His name was escaping me for a little bit, so I was curious if you ever heard of him or were familiar with his work.
Yeah. Look, the keto thing is an interesting one in and of itself. What a lot of people don't understand is that a properly, sensibly formulated, species-appropriate carnivore diet is not particularly ketogenic. You're not particularly ketogenic. You don't produce a lot of ketones necessarily.
Because of the protein? Are you saying because of the protein is slightly elevated?
It's that, and also because the body adapts, the metabolism adapts, the need to produce ketones is reduced precisely because the gluconeogenic process becomes that much more efficient.
Sure. So they're obviously there, but in trace amounts.
Exactly. And the people that say the goal of a ketogenic diet is to have ketones are people that don't understand metabolism. Badly named. I mean, you can be forgiven for it because it's called the ketogenic diet, so that must be the goal. No, the goal of a ketogenic diet for the vast majority of people that ever go on one is to control their body composition, to lose excess body fat. And it does that, obviously, by limiting the amount of intake of carbohydrates, because whether you like it or not, folks, the intake of unnecessary carbohydrates is the single most potent effector of a person's adiposity. Why? Because the Randall cycle will mean that you will have a chronically elevated level of insulin in your blood if you're pouring carbohydrates down your neck and you have any significant amount of fat in your diet at all, which you should. Ergo, because you are hyperinsulinemic, your fat oxidation will be toned down, will be limited, and your propensity to add fat to your adipose tissues, your fat tissue, goes up. That's why most type 2 diabetics that are injecting insulin end up at some point overweight, over fat, I should say. There I am breaking my own rules.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's what we're looking at there. The goal of a ketogenic diet is not to have ketones. If you're one of these people that spends all this money on a fancy meter or keeps buying those sticks that you wee on that go purple if you've got ketones in your urine, you're wasting your money, folks. Stop doing that. Here's another thing. You can be in ketosis strongly and still wee on the stick and get nothing. All you need to do is do some exercise for half an hour before you have a wee.
Yeah, just burn them off.
That's right. Because that's what ketones do. Anyway.
I got a question here then. So from your standpoint, obviously there are people that may need or have to go on a ketogenic diet for like epilepsy or something like that. I know they use it for treating seizures. But what you're basically saying here is you're a normal person there is no need to technically go on a ketogenic diet when you could just do carnivore. Is that
I mean,
your
the other thing
stance?
around that is because a ketogenic diet is sort of as being a healthy thing and a great thing to do. It's all the buzz. Of course, ketogenic
Sure.
diet, great. What that usually does is give a person an excuse to eat a filthy diet. Keto snacks. It's low in sugar, it's good for you. No. It's full of junk, most of it. What you should do as a person, as any given person, is eat a species-appropriate, species-specific diet, which does not contain any of this manufactured junk that's sold to you as keto bars and keto powder and keto this and keto that. Even worse, there are people who are literally consuming exogenous ketones.
Yeah,
Because that's
those are
supposed to
big.
benefit somehow.
Those are big right
There
now.
is some thought that maybe there's a slightly anti-inflammatory effect of ketones. Okay, fine. But if you're living an anti-inflammatory lifestyle, you don't need that. And actually, by putting the ketones in, all you're doing is obfuscating the need, or I guess reducing the need, I should say, of your body to produce its own ketones because you're pouring them in.
Yeah, I mean, you got
Stuff.
ketones on your frame, right? Yeah, I always thought that was interesting. I just had a question, maybe going back here a little bit in regards to carbs and experts talking about carbs. Lane Norton is the one that comes to mind since we've been talking about him so much and shitting on him a little bit, but
Let's
it's
not
all
use the
good.
term expert and lame Norton in the same sentence. He's not.
Sure,
Okay.
I'll
Anyway,
change that then.
carry on. Ask the question. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, I know you might disagree here, but he tries to look at things through a scientific lens. He does when he's on certain podcasts and produces content, whatever the case is. Why is there just so much disagreement? Why is there so much why can't anybody agree on what diet is optimal?
Right.
I just don't I
can help
don't
you.
understand.
I can help you with that. It goes back to what we really started with at the very beginning.
Hmm.
The science that would inform us on the answer to that question, unequivocally, definitely, and without any ability of anyone to debate it with us, does not exist. Still.
Yeah.
That's why this theological discussion continues ad infinitum, and that's why it will continue to do so, because there will always be people who are either theologically or financially vested, or both. Added to that, the fact that there are a huge number of sufferers of Dunning-Kruger syndrome, such as Lame Norton, who genuinely believe themselves to be competent in the field, who are patently not. And as such, they will spout whatever their opinion is as if it's a fact, saying that they're doing science and look incredible to people that don't know about science, because people that don't know about science think the way you do science is you cite publications published in the literature by other people that absolutely prove your point. And now if you argue with those people and say, well, here are the actual facts, they go, what are your sources? Citations. Citations don't prove dick. That's my whole point. They are rubbish. All of them. There are no good quality studies upon which we can make a statement definitively about cause nor effect as that relates to any hard human health outcome over any period of time as that relates to any aspect of the diet. None. We have to build a sensible model, a construct around what is likely to be correct. And we need to delimit it as such. When I say this is what is the species-appropriate, species-specific diet for a human being, I base that on the objective, unquestionable science, that being things like the physical anthropology, the fact that we can go to the long bones of human skeletal remains found anywhere around the world of any age over about 11 or 12,000 years old, up to several 100,000 years old. We can extract some collagen from those long bones. We can take it back to the lab and test the balance of nitrogen-14 and nitrogen-15 isotopes in that collagen, and that tells us without any question whatsoever what that human being definitely ate while it was alive in terms of the balance. They all agree. within about a 5% range. And they all say human beings have developed over at least that 200,000 years, and probably more like our entire existence as humans, because actually we evolved from other species that went back 4.5 million years, that came down from the trees and said, instead of eating this fruit, let's eat these animals. That's what they did. Okay. And then we apply some other definitive knowledge that we definitely have, evolution. It's a thing. It's real. It exists. And we say, right, so positive and negative selection pressures are a thing. We know definitely what humans have eaten. That's what the appropriate diet is. That's how we've developed. That's what our organ systems are. That's what our biology says. That, so that's the way to go. Not a body of piss-poor pseudoscientific claptrappery and crackpottery published in some journals in the last 100 years or so that tell us all about the science, though, when they don't. That's where I'm coming from.
I was curious, Bart. When did you start eating carnivore? Like, is this something that a diet you have been following for a long time, or were you dealing with anything?
Plus or minus, I have floated around 90-95% most of the time. Carnivore for maybe 13, maybe 14 years. I don't know. I didn't actually mark it down on the calendar. Quite a while. And for the 27 years prior to that, I was ketogenic, because that's what you did. So I was still eating an amount of fruit and vegetables and fiber and stuff. I still do from time to time. I'm not perfect, as I said earlier. And at the last 4 weeks, you wouldn't call me a carnivore at all, really. It's been junk. It's been terrible. But, that's about how long it's been going on for me.
Got it. Just over the course of that time, sounds like you were ketogenic, then went carnivore, then carnivore for roughly a decade. Is there anything that you've changed your mind on?
That's the thing. A lot of people say, isn't it great that I'm, as not me, because I haven't done this, others that say I've done this, meaning themselves. Isn't it great that I can tell you something one month and tell you something different the other month? It means I'm open-minded and I'm open to, learning more as I go along. Isn't that great? To which I respond, no, it isn't great. Because what's to say you won't change your mind again next month? Here's what I say to people. This is why I always say, if you don't have a background here, if you're not absolutely 100% set and confident in that your information is correct, then you should shut your mouth. If anyone that looks back on not only my videos that are on YouTube, which go back a couple of years, there was also a whole bunch of stuff that used to be on YouTube that no longer is. It's now reposited somewhere else on another platform. It's called Odyssey. You can go and find it there, Odyssee, and you look up Bart Kay Nutrition Science Watchdog, and you'll find all right back to the very beginning of it was about 7.5, 8 years ago that I started doing these videos. I have not changed my tune on anything. I have been absolutely rock solid and consistent the whole time. Why? Because I was right the first time.
Very clear. Where does the future of nutrition science look like from here, do you think?
At large? I think the future of the entire world is in more peril than it's been at any time in its past, in terms of where we're going, the way we're going there, what we're doing as a species, how we're doing it, how we're communicating with one another, how we're treating each other, what's going on in terms of the restraint, control, division, and conquering of populations around the world. I think it looks entirely negative to me. I don't see any positivity in that regard at all, except for small pockets of resistance around the world. Most notably at the moment, there's one political party in the UK, one, that is fighting against this nonsense. And I suspect they'll probably do very well in the upcoming elections in the next 3 years, whenever they are in the UK. There is one political organization in the United States doing the right thing at large. It's the current POTUS and his brigade. Problem I have with that is, while I think largely, as far as I can tell, in terms of policies and working against this other nonsense, I think he's doing the right thing. I think the problem with that bloke is that he is the worst orator in the world. I think he's absolutely appalling as a public speaker. his level of appeal to the average person, I think, is near zero. He's quite repugnant to people, and as such, that's the thing that forms the Trump derangement syndrome, I think. That and left-wing ideology, which is entirely unacceptable to me, no matter who's espousing it. So I see very little positivity in that regard overall. This evil globalist agenda that's been in place for a number of years, and it's been rolled out very effectively in most parts of the Western world, is just what I said. It's the most evil thing that's ever occurred from its very roots. And as such, I think that the conduct of pure science is a thing of the past. It may well be a thing of the future, in the future, if humanity can pull its head out of its own asshole and wake the fuck up. How's that? I hope
beautiful.
That's my hope. My hope is that humanity wakes up.
Well said. And I think that's a good place to end it. Anything new coming up for you, Bart?
Fighting the good fight. That's not new. That's going to continue. More learning how to be a farmer, because that's kind of new for the last 15, 16 months. I'm hoping for more exposure out there. I'm hoping that despite Al Gore and his rhythms, meaning the Al Gore rhythm from YouTube, I'm hoping that it starts treating me a bit more kindly, because basically I'm as handbraked as hell in terms of my visibility. My habit of espousing non-accepted narrative and being quite unequivocal about doing so, I think, has been a problem. So I'm hoping that gets better. I'm hoping that more people get to see who I am and that what I have to say is worth hearing. Even if you don't necessarily like the way in which I deliver it, again, don't care. The truth needs to get out there. And if you need to be slapped around the face by something that's kind of jolting or shocking to you, I guess that's okay. I think, Trump derangement syndrome is one thing. I think Bart Kay derangement syndrome is another thing, perhaps. And I'm not putting myself remotely on the same level as Trump in any regard at all. I'm not comparing myself to Trump. I'm just saying there is derangement syndrome about me. There are people out there who will literally say, I can't find any record of this guy. I can't find any record of his credentials, and he's not credible. Well, if you look, you can find it, some of it. Some of it I've actually taken down offline and taken because I'm no longer working in that industry, and it's my right to have a private life if I want to, about my past, my background, etc. But people that want to say that, what they're actually saying is that they can't engage with me in terms of my argument. They can't assail my argument, so they have to take shots at me as a person, which means I win, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I hope more people get to see that. I hope that my reach improves so that I can help more people to see the light.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's my hope.
Yeah, and let's talk about that too, real quick. Where can people find you online? YouTube, drop all the socials, all that.
Yeah, okay, too easy to find me on YouTube. It's at Bart, B-A-R-T -K-A-Y. That'll find my main channel where most of my videos are. I've actually got 4 or 5 other YouTube channels on various other different topics too, which are usually linked underneath all my pre-recorded videos, so you can find them there as well. If you're interested in what's happening on the old farm here and what's going on, a lot of farm-related videos are on my IG, and that's at Bart _KAY_nutrition, which is a bit of a misnomer because that Instagram account is really nothing to do with nutrition. It's about the farming that's going on. They're the main places I hang out, and there are links out from there to other places and other things that you can find from there. Follow the rabbit warren. Watch my stuff, binge watch it. As I said before, I'm safe and effective. Me, I'm the science, and don't question the science. That is a joke, obviously, but not the bit about watching me. That's not a joke. Watch me. The bit about me being the only person to listen to. Well, actually, I kind of do believe it a bit because there are very few others that are up to it, I think, sadly.
Yeah, well, I got to tell you, I binge watched a lot of your YouTube videos, and your debate with Dr. Peter Rogers. It was absolutely freaking hilarious. I felt bad for the man. It was
Right.
good. I suggest people watch it because it was hilarious.
Also, if you want some more fun, watch the debate style discussion I had with Richard Burgess, otherwise known as Vegan Gains. That was hilarious.
Vegan game. Okay, I didn't see that. I got to check
Smashed
that
into
out.
bits as well. Well, that's no surprise. But it was to him. He thought he was going to do well. There's Dunning-Kruger for you. Yeah, and others. You know, there are a bunch of other debates I've had with others, including recently there's another doctor called Terry Simpson that I absolutely tore to shreds. And it didn't change a damn thing about how he behaves. He's still out there, still doing the same thing.
I got to check those out.
Anyway, go and do that. Binge watch my stuff, everybody. Do it now.
All right. I'll put all that stuff in the show notes too, Bart, so all the listeners can find you and go check those things out. And again, I appreciate your time, Bart, and thank you for the extra time. This is great, just yucking it up with you. I do appreciate that, so thank you. And to all you guys listening to the Low Carb Consultant podcast,
yeah,
we'll catch you all on the next one.
Hey, and
Take
thanks
care.
very much, Max, for having me. I appreciate you because this is the way we do cross-pollination. So, yeah, good stuff.
Absolutely. Great cross-pollinating with you. Boom.